So this is from The Surrender of Sleep. He whose heart is pure sleeps, and he who sleeps has a pure heart. This is the great secret to being as indefatigable as a child. To have that strength in your legs that a child has, those new legs, those new souls, and to start over every morning, always new, like the young, like the new. Hope. Yes, they tell me that there are men who work well and who sleep poorly, who don't sleep. What a lack of confidence in me. It's almost worse than if they worked poorly but slept well, than if they worked but didn't sleep, because sloth is no worse a sin than anxiety. In fact, it's even a less serious than anxiety, and then despair, and then a lack of confidence in me. By the way, this is a translation from French, so the language is a bit awkward. I'm not talking, says God, about those men who don't work and who don't sleep. Those men are sinners, it goes without saying. They get what they had coming to them. Great sinners. All they have to do is work. I'm talking about those who work and who don't sleep. I pity them. I'm talking about those who work and who thus, in doing this, are following my commandment. Poor children. And who, on the other hand, don't have the courage, don't have the confidence, don't sleep. I pity them. I hold it against them. A bit. They don't trust me. As a child lays innocently in his mother's arms, thus do they not lay, innocently in the arms of my providence. They have the courage to work. They don't have the courage to do nothing. They possess the virtue of work. They don't possess the virtue of doing nothing, of relaxing, of resting, of sleeping. Unhappy people, they don't know what's good. They look after their affairs well during the day, but they don't want to give them to me to look after during the night. As if I weren't capable of looking after them for one night. He who doesn't sleep is unfaithful to hope. And that's the greatest infidelity, because it's an infidelity to the greatest faith. Okay, lads, I don't know, did you zone out or did all of that kind of resonate or what? But Graham, do you have any thoughts on that kind of that excerpt from that poem? And maybe if you want to tie it into your Substack or maybe not.
I mean, I think the best way to go forward is to bring it into the Substack, and then for Philip to discuss, the deeper meanings of resurrection. But the thing I mentioned in my Substack is that sleep it's the permitted ability to romanticize disappearing into nothingness, right? It's the good end of, shall we say, you know, deleting yourself, right? It's the good alternative. It's the thing you do with the hope of resurrecting, right? It's a very humble submission to a powerful force like slumber, because you have no control when you're sleeping. And so after a hard day, you can be tempted to give up in a number of ways, but sleep provides you the rest necessary to get up and do it again. So it is a type of death, and then it is a hope and a resurrection, i.e., waking up. So it's very ritualistic. That's what I mentioned as one of the symbolic elements of sleeping, or in the entry I wrote, napping.
Philip, can you come in there?
Yeah, I mean, Graham's right in terms of submitting yourself to something to lose control, right? Because that's how sleep is presented in the scriptures. It's always presented in connection with death, with an encounter with something. It's either presented as a connection and an encounter with death, or something otherworldly, right? Because what two things happen in dreams, or excuse me, what two things happen in sleep? It's either death or dreams, right? Dreams of something either above or below, right? You see these dreams of Jacob, for example, of Abraham, of Saint Joseph, right? And they're all encountering these beings either above or below them, right? But the most important thing is obviously death. In the poem, it talks about the courage to sleep and people not trusting God. So the structure that's sort of set up here is that you have, the first commandment is to work, right? To be fruitful and multiply. That involves work, obviously, to fill the earth and subdue it, right? So it involves this type of work, this ordering, this naming, this control over something. Doesn't necessarily mean a bad control over something, but a control over something, right? And sleep is a descent into death, right? Because the head no longer has control over the body. That which is above no longer has control over that which is below it. And so this is why in the Gospels, right, you don't ever see Christ sleep. When does he sleep? Well, he sleeps at his passion on the cross, right? But it's in that sleep, right? He's the poet the poem that we just read talks about sleep in terms of right, trust, in terms of courage, in terms of hope, right? Well, hope for what? If sleep is connected to death, then what the heck do we have to hope for? Well, we have what comes after it, which is resurrection, right? Which Christ shows in the pattern, something new, something creative comes at night, right? It's when things can grow, can flourish, can blossom, right? We think that, oh no, sleep is going on into death. That's a scary thing. Of course it is. But that's when things secretly sort of happen. It's why all these plants, you see it in the created world, right? All of these plants, you go to sleep, you wake up and wow, look at all these plants that have sprung up, right? So it's this ingrained pattern to everything. We just have to have the courage to do it because it is a scary thing to lose control. It is a scary thing for the head to lose control over the body. We want to be in control of things. But at the end of the day, we have to let go of that, descend down into death in order to be made better than what we are now. At every sort of level, right? In terms of like a metabolical healing sort of thing, right?
I wanted to add on to the sleeping thing is what I wanted to add on to, but well, so in the poem that you read aloud, it mentioned a baby in a mother's arms sleeping. That's a type of submission. Philip mentioned submission as well. Christ sleeping on the cross. This is submission. It's a trust in sleep, not just trust in going to sleep, but trust in the process of doing it. And there actually is one other instance in scripture I can think of where there's sleeping and a huge moral to be had, and it's Christ asleep in the Sea of Galilee during the tempest. And all of his disciples were in the boat and they were tweaking out because Christ was asleep, and it was a storm unlike anything they'd ever seen. Now, a lot of these guys were fishermen, right? So they've probably seen their fair share of storms, but they're afraid, and they're even extra afraid with Christ in the boat, which shows the magnitude of the storm, right? And so this is a little bit like being afraid to go to sleep, right? But in another direction, the disciples were afraid that Christ, who could control the storm, was asleep. Well, why would they be afraid of that? And that's just a reflection I had on that.
Yeah, that's a good correction, Graham, because I did say that Christ never sleeps. That is the one exception. That is the one time he does fall asleep, right? And why are they terrified? Well, what's the immediate thing he does afterwards? He's not like, oh, it's all right, guys. He immediately calms the storm and says, oh, ye little faith, and shows his power as God, right? Obviously his ultimate sleep does not come until he's on the cross, and then he really shows his power as God.